What's up? I'm Sam. I'm the treasurer of Nativus. When I'm not doing money things, I enjoy getting out into the pond too. So today in this video, we'll be covering chemical sampling. So we'll be looking at nitrates, we'll be looking at temperature, we'll be looking at DO. All of this is mentioned and explained in the field guide, as mentioned in probably previous videos, as well as the materials needed. So let's get right to it. So we're going to start with temperature sensing. Now for temperature sensing, we have a number of different methods. For example, you can use the Vernier LabQuest as well as the temperature probe that connects right into it. Or if this is unavailable, you can use any number of the methods we've outlined in the field guide. This are low cost and have significantly less startup capital than the LabQuest may have. But for this video, we're going to be going through LabQuest essentially as a tutorial, especially because a lot of programs and organizations will be using LabQuest just as a first time, maybe as an introduction. All right, so you want to start with turning on your Vernier LabQuest. Here we have our Vernier LabQuest already on. And to begin with, we're going to plug this into channel 1, 2, or 3. We can pick any of them. They're white and they go with it. Not digital ports on the top, these ones on the side. So we're going to go with channel 1. There we go. And we see that we have a temperature reading already here. And so this is giving us the ambient temperature, which is the temperature of the air. And we see that we have it in 30.1 degrees Celsius. In general, we'll be using degrees Celsius. Ideally, we'd like to use degrees Celsius to ensure that all the data across the state is uniform so that everyone can use it and access it in the same way. Yeah, so let's get out to the pond. Let's find this temperature. All right, now we can get right into testing the water. Then down here, and get in there. You don't need to get directly into the water, but you just need to make sure that you're not touching ideally any mud or maybe any of the other algae or anything that could be around it. So you get the temperature of the actual water rather than sort of any of the gunk like this that might be around it. So we're going to try to lay it down a little bit here, make sure we're only touching water. This temperature, as we can see, it's a little fluctuating a little bit in the tense. And so we're going to wait for it to stabilize a little bit. Part of that is just human error. You're moving your hand. That's all right. So we're just going to wait. And we see it stabilize at a consistent 30.3 degrees Celsius. So now we can take that and we can record that as a temperature. If it fluctuates just a little bit right after you decide to write it down, that's all right. In general, it'll only change by maybe 0.1 or 0.2, which isn't that too bad in terms of the data and calculations.
Next up, we're going to be testing for nitrates in the water. Nitrates are a good source to see how much pollution there is in the water. The more nitrates, the more pollution, the more chance for algal breakouts, which seems to be the case in this pond. For algae, it is a lot more complicated than the last temperature probe. So we'll go ahead and get out our nitrate probe. So we can open this up, and we notice we have our nitrate probe. Nitrate probes come in a special case. And this has a sponge at the bottom which helps keep this in line and keep it in good shape since these are a little bit expensive. We can go ahead and attach this to our channel 1. Channel 1 right here. And if it does not sense it immediately, you can go ahead into sensors and sensor setup, and you will notice this screen where you will see the different channels and different digital channels and what you want to put in. As we notice, it already has nitrate ISC, which is a good sign. Next up for our nitrate probe, which is not common for any of the other probes, is calibration. Calibration is extremely important for these ones, and usually the box will come with calibration items. So here we have the high end of the calibration, sodium nitrate, 100 milligrams per liter, and this one is our low of 1 milligram per liter. So we can go ahead and use these for our calibration testing. What we do is we first take this out of its case, and then we go into sensors, calibrate. And under sensors and calibrate, you'll notice that there is 1-point calibration. I'm not sure if we can clearly see on the video, but you will notice it on your LabQuest. 1-point calibration is usually used for the much simpler ones. But in this case, we're going to have to do a 2-point calibration since we do have 2 things provided. If you don't have 2, you can go ahead with 1-point calibration and test your luck. So we're going to go ahead and click OK. And what we will see is, give me 1 second, calibrate now. And it's going to look for an enter known value. So this is where we get this prompt, and we go ahead and open one of our known values. Please make sure you don't misplace this liquid, since this is extremely important. Go ahead and take that, hold your LabQuest in one hand, and what we can do is, since this is just for testing purposes, I don't want to break the seal, but you would take your probe, drop it in here, and wait. And let's just presume that we did. So we'll presume that this one is actually filled with this, and we'll go ahead and drop it in. You're gonna drop in the number 1 milligram per liter. So you'd go ahead, put 1, keep. And then for your next known value, again, these are new and these are expensive, so just for this demonstration purpose, I don't want to open the seal. These do have seal for protection, and if it is broken, please be careful about what you're using, because we don't want to have wrong data. Now we're going to presume that this one is filled with this, and this is filled with 100 milligrams per liter. So you're going to go ahead, drop that into our known value 2. 100. Keep that, and that should be done with your calibration. Next up, after you calibrate, what you could do is go ahead down into our stream. So let's walk on down. And it's the same procedure as we did with temperature. You don't want to hit the ground or any of the algae on top. You want to find a good area with just water. So we can go ahead and bend on down. And for this shallow region, go ahead and drop it under the surface and wait for it to stabilize.
Now we're ready to test our pH. And so we'll go through a lot of the same steps as the nitrate calibration, except this time we get to do 1-point calibration instead of 2-point calibration. So we'll take you through the steps of that because it's a little bit different. So we'll get our LabQuest as well as our probe here, and we'll plug it into one of the channel ports as usual. There we go. And we'll immediately get a reading. So this reading, as we can see, is fluctuating pretty significantly. It's going anywhere from 4.35 to 4.4 to 4.3 and then 4.4. And so it's fluctuating a lot because we know that it's not very calibrated. So we'll ensure that first that the solution that we have, just as with the nitrate probe, the original solution that this came in had a seal. And so if it did not have a seal, maybe you have an issue with your solution and you should immediately stop and figure that out. But with this solution, we know we've been soaking in it, we know where we got this, and we know it was fine. So we're gonna basically just sort of use it to calibrate it because it's the same calibrating solution. So in order to do the 1-point calibration, we can go here on our screen where we're reading it out. We can tap it, we can go to calibrate, and we see there's a little button here for 1-point calibration. The automatic setting for LabQuest systems is to use 2-point calibration simply because it's more accurate. But a lot of times, for example, with the pH probe, that's simply not possible. So what we're going to do is we're going to click this little button here. It's very, very small. And then we're going to click OK. Yeah, now we're going to click Calibrate Now. There we go. I clicked OK. Calibrate Now, and enter the known value. We know the known value of this should be 4, and our units were already placed in pH. If your units weren't in pH, you might want to check that. Keep. OK. Now we're done. Now it's going to stay at a consistent 4, and we know that this solution is 4 for our pH, and we can accurately test our water. So I'm going to put the pen right here, just for safekeeping. And we're going to begin sort of just popping this off. Hoping we don't spill the solution. Ideally, you want a partner around you. You can just grab the solution. But here, I'm just going to get a little bit far in the water and just drop it in here. And try to not to touch any mud and keep it in the water. We see we're getting a pH. It's fluctuating still, so that naturally with any other probe, we want to make sure we wait until we get a stable reading. So now we see the pH is sort of staying at 6.15, which is a fairly solid pH. You know, it's going to go up and down a little bit, but that should be our reading. So we can write this down, and then in general, you want to do maybe 1 or 2 more tests, but that's the process.
So we've gone over a couple of chemical sampling techniques. We've gone over temperature, nitrate, and pH. Of course, there's still DO, there's calcium. There's a lot more that we do have available on StreamWatch Plus, but for just this purpose, we use a couple to go over non-calibration, 1-point calibration, and 2-point calibration. Now that we do have our data, you can use Survey 123 either on your phone or on your laptop and go ahead and plug these data values into the chemical observation section of our StreamWatch Plus survey.